Hello, World Civ 106. Welcome to week 9. And I just want to say that I'm really happy that many of you are actually hanging in there and keeping up with the work. Some of you are now catching up on a lot of late work, which I'm allowing. And so, you know, this is really important, and I think you're going to feel really good. We are understandably still having a hard time concentrating, but you are all, focusing on your schoolwork, and you're doing well. Now, for many of you on the documentary, I mentioned that you didn't put dates, but I decided to give points on that case because it's a little more tricky with documentary, and so many of you didn't. But really, though, I have said at the beginning of every announcement to remind you about dates and works cited. And what I want to encourage you to do when you do have a Sunday paper where you need to respond to a documentary, one of the things that you should be listening for in the documentary is the time period that's being mentioned. And if not, as I mentioned, if you're going to talk about Islam and Jesus, at least kind of saying when Islam or Muhammad came into history and writing that down, that's just important. Remember, a history paper without any kind of dates indicating the time period you're covering isn't a history paper, right? So I'm just going to keep mentioning this. I shouldn't have to keep mentioning it all the time, but I am. But in this case, yeah, I get it on the documentary. What I did appreciate is many of you really seemed genuinely interested in the topic, and you did write really quality papers. And I'm hoping what this also helps you to realize is, even though there was a lot of information to take in, that a religion that has been often portrayed strictly in the negative, you had an opportunity to kind of just see a little more wider variation of the religion as it's been manifest in history. And I always want to remind all of you, if I wanted to do a negative take on Islam, from historical behavior to controversial passages in the Quran or the Hadiths, I could make a very grim, well-documented lecture. If I wanted to do that with Christianity, I can do it just the same. With Judaism, just the same. With Buddhism, just the same. Hinduism, just the same. So yeah, okay, so I just want to remind you of that. So always keep in mind when it comes to the topic of religion, what I always want to remind you is, but I would actually argue this even with all politics and history. When a particular website, a news source, a scholar simply focuses on negative things or everything positive, you should be suspect of them. If you come out of watching a show or reading a book that makes something look 100% flawless or 100% evil, you are getting most likely a very heavy dose of propaganda. And the propaganda might be true. So this is the thing, right? If you just highlight positive things and you don't mention the negative, it's not that your documentation is false, but it's your omissions actually are creating fake news, if you want to put it that way. And the same goes for the negative. And that's also why, just on the side to say I don't like Fox and CNN and some of these other news sources, is that they seem to be very consistent on how they portray a situation, and there's never this thing called nuance. So nuance is important, okay? Because nuance deals with reality. It doesn't mean that you can't take a position and draw a line in the sand on something. It simply means, though, that you're not deliberately trying to ignore a wider range of facts and, all that. So now we are going into the topic of Africa, and I like the subject matter that we're covering, it builds on knowledge you already have that we've dealt with. And so I really hope you find this fascinating and enjoyable as well. And I'm just always happy to see my students learning things that much of the world should be learning, and to go into topics that are often not delved into enough. Last thing to say, I'm not going to be much longer on this announcement, but look, I have many students who are calling and are writing me that they're sick. Listen, I just want to say something, please. I was sick not that long ago, and I had a flu. I called the doctors. I don't have insurance, but I called a medical center here, and I described my symptoms, and I just asked, what's the responsible thing to do during this virus thing? What they pointed out is that this is allergy and flu season, and that the symptoms of coronavirus often match allergies and flus. So this is kind of confusing. But what they said is that you don't really want to mess with things that are dealing with the respiratory way, especially when you have something going on in your chest and coughing and hard to breathe. That's especially something to take note of. So keeping in mind also that many of you, since you're younger, and my students, you think that you can't get it. I just discovered that a friend of mine, a guy that I met while traveling, he lives in Finland. He's considerably younger than me. He's in his 30s. And he didn't only have it, he went to the hospital in a very bad way. And he's coming out of it now. He thinks it might have been because of his asthma, but he got it, and he was in the hospital next to a 7-year-old guy, and he was on the breathing machine and everything. Okay? And so now keep in mind, if you're younger, I'm not trying to freak anybody out. Like, you're most likely to come out of it okay. But it still means that you could be giving it to other people, and it also means that you could be put into a worse way. So what I'm asking you to do, please, is not to be overly paranoid, but if you do get some kind of symptoms, be proactive and just call a professional. You're not, I guess they don't want us going in, right? Because it impacts the doctors are really overloaded with work. But at least they can kind of assess you. Like, so when I was on the phone, they were listening to my breathing and kind of giving me some feedback on that. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And remember, I have your back. If you turn in late work, I'm going to give you full points. Focus on your health of you and your family first right now, and then, get to school. So if you have any questions or problems or issues, again, don't forget to contact me. All right? Okay. We'll be in touch.